Austin Yoakum, welcome to the Soccer Queens podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Our first time talking in like a couple of years. We just kind of covered from some of our changes from the last time that we had a podcast back on mine.
It seems like forever ago, and we were just talking off air that you kind of popped back up on my page because you were resharing like Joe Rogan and Sean Baker on Joe Rogan, and I was like, oh wow, I maybe should talk to Austin today.
Yeah, I mean that post was one of my favorites. It's just talking about the kind of the self-fulfilling prophecy, and something that I've been really into recently is like the self-fulfilling prophecy of fragileness and our approach in the field of like what I think there is some ill intent there, but what a lot of people view as good intent by saying I'm going to keep this person safe in their training has turned into a very fragile mindset for a lot of these athletes. And what used to be the 40 to 50-year-old way of thinking, when your body's actually starting to like slow down and fall apart and you're actually starting to pull back on some of the things, is turning into, I see some 13 to 15-year-olds thinking the same way 40 to 50-year-olds like used to think. So yeah, I saw that post. I'm like, this is the most eloquent way what I've been thinking about in my head has been phrased, and got to share that.
I can't wait to really get into today's conversation because you go on your Twitter page and a lot of what you're posting would be considered as non-traditional SNC. Usually I scroll through Twitter or Instagram and I see people saying, oh, here's how you do a split squat. Here's why it's beneficial. Keep your foot flat. Like make sure your knee does this and your knee does that. It's like, I kind of want to see something new. And I go on your page and I'm like, wow, like he's really getting athletes in very uncomfortable positions, but also positions where they can be creative and move freely. And I definitely think there's such a need for that in a lot of programs. So, kind of just like get into how you started to develop your philosophy and what are some of the big rocks in your program.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for what people see when they come to the page is like they see all the different exercises, but it's really just seeing what is for what is and like red pilling your strength conditioning. And I think the reason that so many like Instagram pages and Twitter pages look exactly the same is because they are. It's like just copied and pasted from whatever coaching tree they came from. And there's not a lot of individualistic thinking there. Or and it's not even to be a rebel to rebel. It's not even to be like, oh, let's not reverse lunge because other people reverse lunge. Like we reverse lunge all the time. Like we do those things all the time. But it's the red pill thinking of I want a stimulus here. Maybe it's a vertical press stimulus. I just want a vertical press stimulus. Can I see the point of getting to a vertical press stimulus without having a barbell in my hands, without the traditional way of just doing a dumbbell overhead press? And when you see the stimulus, your goal stimulus of a vertical press, you can do it 10,000 different ways. I can get a vertical press stimulus by doing a handstand push-up, and then maybe I can work a little bit more core, a little bit more hands, or a little bit more finger work there, or maybe some wrist there, maybe some shoulder stability there. Maybe it is when we're doing some of the hip mobility stuff or hip training where instead of just always doing a Copenhagen, maybe I can do some sort of hip flow. Or and I think the spine is a big one where we have like three big movements that we do in strength conditioning for the spine, and that's like all we do. And you look at the spine and you see the spine for what it is and what it actually is, and you see the millions of different ways that it can move and the millions of different ways that we can load it. And I really feel like that one, the variability, giving the athlete the variability prepares them for a lot more situations and a lot prepares them for a lot more positions that they'll find themselves in. I talk a lot about like giving them movement options, giving them movement tools to use, and exposing their bodies, but also the engagement piece. Like I'm really big into building a movement practice, and it's been a big eye opener for me. Of I want my kids to enjoy the session and have something to look forward to in a session, have something that pushes their body in a session, and well, I'm still getting results because again, because we're still just doing a horizontal press or a vertical press stimulus, we're just doing it in a way that's a little bit more engaging, a way that's has the athlete buy in a little bit more or think they're doing something a little bit more special than it probably is. And I've been big into just challenging and giving our athletes movement problems. And that is something that I talked about yesterday. It's like athletes don't hate the weight room. Like that is I just it's such a weird thing. Like we are in charge of an athlete's movement practice as strength coaches. And the number one thing you hear in the strength conditioning world is athletes hate the weight room, so I did this. Athletes hate the weight room, so it's like your entire job is to get them to move in the weight room and doing the and they hate your entire job. They hate what you do. Like that should be such a red flag and it's not. Like we use it as a badge of honor. Like athletes hate it so whatever whatever whatever. And the truth is like we use that as a post hoc analysis of like they don't hate the weight room. They just hate your weight room and how you're preparing it. So I think there's a lot of ways to get the stimulus in that we want to get in. So we're still getting the results because I know our jobs depend on the results. I know the athletes want to get better. They want results like that. Well, they are enjoying it. Well, they have something to look forward to. And I think it helps on the wear and tear on the body. And there's a lot of performance benefits. But honestly, I think the biggest thing is that mental piece of it, where the athletes want to show up every single day, and there's a new movement challenge for them to solve every single day. And they get to be athletes in the weight room. They get to be athletes in their hypertrophy, in their rehab, in their traditional like boring stuff that they don't like doing because they're not actually solving a movement problem. And I think we can give them movement problems while still getting the stimulus that we want to get done.
No, you said that you still do some of the traditional stuff, like you still reverse lunge. And I think like that's the thing with like Twitter, like you don't see as much context. You're like, oh, that's all Austin does. So when do you include like more of the creative type movements? And then when do you like make time for like the more like, okay, we're building like absolute strength and like doing some more like, I guess, like structured things?
Yeah, I would say it's a kind of an ebb and flow based off of what I'm feeling like with the athletes on that day, what I'm feeling like with the athletes on the week, where we kind of want to push things. So like today, it was a traditional like 2 rep max on the bench was our main lift today. Like that was our main lift. And then if I have a traditional something that they've done a bunch of times there, then we'll add in a little bit more variability to their movements. So like their their throw today was this two-handed med ball throw that was a 360 with a pocket radar. So that was one of their big movement challenges of the day. But then we'll also do like traditional plyometrics on like we used a super cat today, but we'll do like plyo push-ups, like traditional plyo push-ups there. But we kind of ebb and flow based off and a give and take of if we're doing something traditional here or something a little bit more output based here, we'll do something a little bit more creative here. And if I feel like the session's pretty dead, we'll go little bit more creative, try to bring out a little bit more energy there. Or if I feel like they're locked in and they're ready to go and ready to PR that day, we'll stick with little bit more of the traditional methods. But I also normally just give them both options and see where the session organically goes. Because some days, and the jumps are a really good example of this. Some days the jump mat, they will just sit there and yell at each other on the jump mat for 40 minutes. We're just doing a traditional vertical jump. They're getting after it. It's amazing. And then some days the jump mat's just dead. And that's something we don't talk about. Like some of our traditional testing methods are they're just dead. Same with flying 10, same with whatever it is. It just doesn't have that energy for them there that day for the athletes. And we'll do it every single week just to get the metrics and get the numbers, but sometimes that energy just isn't there. But we'll do like we'll have a 360 broad jump paired with that, and that 360 broad jump is super hot and spicy that day. So and they're yelling at each other for that. So I think giving them both options, seeing where the session kind of organically goes that day, and letting it go there. And obviously, if you need to nudge or move it there, but it organically kind of splits to some days are the output, some days are the creative, and they get after it, and you have the kind of the best of both worlds to where you're giving them a movement problem they can enjoy to solve. You're not forcing that problem on them, and that's something again I see with flying tens and jump mats. They're kind of turning into like the old meathead, bigger, faster, stronger of like bench squat, deadlift type things. It's like they were super cool for athletes right away, not because they were super cool, just because it was something new and fun and that they could test a little bit more athletically. But now we're just ramming that down our athletes' throats to where they're not enjoying that anymore. And that's not because the tool is bad at all. Just like the bench or the squat aren't bad over here. It's just that if you beat an athlete's head and you take the creativity and you take the options away for them long enough, they're gonna learn to despise the tool that you're using. And I think the more tools you can throw at your athletes, well, still driving them in a certain direction, so you're not just randomly throwing things at them. I think the better and the less you use, it's kind of like a drug. The less you use and less used to the drug you get, and then you can have days where the jump mat they're all PRing by like 2 inches, and you're like, "What is happening there?" Like that's insane that is happening. You guys are 100 jumps in the jump mat, and you guys are PRing still. And it's because we didn't overuse the drug of the jump mat. And same thing with vertical timer or sprint timers and the such.
Now, as far as some of the more creative and flowy movement, what are some of your favorites? I've seen like a lot of like tumbling and flips, and they look really challenging. And I'm sure like a lot of athletes at first might struggle with that. But what are some of your favorites, and what are some of the ones where your athletes like find it pretty hard to do?
Yeah, so we'll always once a week, we'll always do some sort of tumbling, some groundwork. I like stillness and softness with the ground, and we'll do always some sort of work with that. So that's usually our Wednesday with an upper body day. Um, I think one of the athletes' favorites is jump variations. Like I change my jump variations nearly every day. Tuesdays and Thursdays are our lower body days, and so every day we're jumping on those 2 days. And I always have a horizontal jump movement problem, and vertical jump movement problem. Um, every single Tuesday, Thursday. And that's where the ebb and flow comes in. So if I have a spicy horizontal jump movement problem, so it's like a 360 broad jump. So they're flipping in a circle or they're spinning in a circle while they're going for distance on that broad jump, and we're still marking and measuring. So there's intent there. On days like that, then our vertical jump movement problem is going to be a little bit more traditional. It could even just be a weighted jump or a super cat jump or a hurdle jump or a box jump, something traditional there. So it'll kind of go back and forth. So those are really good ways to kind of add some of that variability. I think one of the best things that we do is we always, before we even start any of this, before we start our agility, we'll always have some sort of warm up game or some sort of movement exploration at the beginning of our workouts, and that's where you can really get creative. And some of the games are terrible and some of them suck, and like but we're still moving our bodies and doing it. But like today we had Finger Wars, which is a game I have some climbing buddies at a climbing gym. If any of you guys know climbers, like they're a bunch of they're a weird group of people. And I went to a party with them this past weekend, and they're all playing this Finger War where you like wrap hands, and you have basically what looks like a gun pointing at each other while you're holding hands, and your goal is to get that finger to touch the other person. So it turns into this kind of like grappling, flow based, dance based grappling game. Um, so that movement problem changes every single day. And that's something that I challenge a lot of coaches to do is like have one part of your workout every single week where you're creating something new. And I think that does so many good things for you. One, as a coach, just growth as a coach. Like I need to one, it forces you continually educate yourself, continually look at new things, continually try new things. But two, it kind of puts yourself on the line when you're exposing yourself to these new games because I have no idea if that like a finger game was cool with the climbers. Well, what's that going to look like with my athletes when I have 40 athletes in there, ranging from a Division 1 left tackle to like our high school soccer player, like what's that going to look like when they're working with each other and how that's going. And I think putting yourself out there and experimenting, and right when you start, it's kind of stressful because it's super nice to have that warm up sheet. It's super nice to have everything set in stone and it's going to work. But then you never get the 10 out of 10 days. You kind of just sit at that 6 out of 10 day every single day because you never want to reach. And in those days, some of those warm ups are 1 out of 10 and they're terrible and they're boring. And like when you get better at it too, you just shift it pretty quickly. Like if it's not working, you're like, oh, that sucks. But again, that also shows humility to your athletes. Like when was the last time a coach admitted an exercise sucked or a warm up sucked? Like a lot of coaches, they take that as like an ego thing of, oh, maybe they'll think I'm unprepared. But I really just believe it just shows the human side of you. And the athletes love that you're trying new things and you're trying to work on some of these things and you're doing it in a silly way of a warm up to where it's not like you're going to get them hurt or anything bad's going to happen. Like you're playing basically like a thumb battle, like a thumb war out there. So I think it does a lot of good things for the relationship with the athletes. And I think that's something that's also not talked enough about is we kind of create this coach athlete hierarchy. And we do that a lot of times because a lot of coaches are very insecure. And the one time they have control over their lives is when they coach. That's when they get to be the top dog. That's when they get to wear the tight polo. That's where everybody has to listen to them. And I really just do not believe that's a very good way to lead people. I really believe it's a relationship, and I believe relationships are messy. And I believe relationships are very real. And you're going to have days where you go in as a coach and you try something new and it doesn't work and it sucks. And you, in a relationship, you can admit, I messed up there as a coach. That wasn't a very good game. Or it could be the other way. It could be a good game, and the athletes are just like, we're just sloppy today. Like like Mondays are a tough day to like bring in a new game. Like a lot of times their brains aren't working. Like, coach, man, like we're not thinking, like we might need something simpler. But then you have those conversations, and I think that's again a bigger philosophical piece that I'm kind of into with a lot of this stuff is there's a coach athlete relationship there. It's okay if that relationship is messy on certain days, and it should be messy. And I think if every single thing that you do is pretty and perfect, and there's never any mess and there's never any chaos, that just doesn't represent real life, and it doesn't represent the sport that they're just going to go out and play right when they're done with you. And we're kind of creating this fairy tale land in our training of everything's pretty, everything's linearly progressed. Look at all my green boxes on my Excel sheet, and then they go out to the field and nothing is like that at all. They're losing and they have no idea how to lose because you never had them lose in your training. They're struggling, they're not PRing every day, whatever it is. I just think the more real life you can make training, the better.
I love that. That's so brilliant. And it's like anytime you are being creative, whether it's as a coach or an athlete playing in the game or doing a certain drill at training, it's like creativity is risky. But without risk, we wouldn't have sports. We wouldn't have the richness of life. So I love that you're just really preparing your athletes, not just for the field, the court, but you're also preparing them for life. And I kind of just want to segue into this whole fragility conversation that we touched on earlier, but are you seeing now, I mean, you've been doing this for a while. Are you seeing just young athletes becoming more bubble wrapped and becoming softer, I guess? And, it's not their fault, but it definitely goes on us adults, whether it's coaches or parents. Are you seeing more of that?
It's unbelievably sad. Like it's actually sad. And
Yeah.
as burnt out as I was with like the performance sector of strength conditioning, now it's definitely like that lit my fire because I see 13-year-olds wearing knee braces. And I'm like, what's wrong? Nothing. Nothing's wrong with their knee. Like nothing. They were just some doctor just gave it to them. And the thing is, that athlete's gonna think from 13 on, unless somebody really shifts his brain. A doctor told me something's wrong with my knee. I need this knee brace for the rest of my life. I wear this knee. For the coach, my parents, whoever it is, told me I'm not supposed to move that way. So for the rest of my life, I'm not going to do that. I just really do, and like it's very frustrating because coaches just they're like, oh, it's not that deep. Like it is. You have not seen what that does to an athlete, and I've seen it like I've seen it live out. I've seen it live out when somebody believes they are fragile because they were told they are fragile. Again, we don't inherently believe that. We don't inherently believe we are broken. We don't inherently believe that we are not enough. Like those are things that are taught into us and preached into us. And again, I don't think it's from a negative light. A lot of times it's just because we're trying to protect them or we're just busy and we don't even understand the words that we're saying. But ignorance is not doesn't just because you're ignorant and you're saying things does not forgive what you're saying. And so I have athletes that we tell them to tumble, like nothing crazy, none of the backflips that you see like some of our like expert gymnasts do. No, a tumble, like a roll on the ground. And they look at you like, am I going to get hurt? Bro, you're 12 and we have 6-inch mats out there. No, you're not going to get hurt at all. And one of the things is like that confidence that you can build up into an athlete. Like once you get an athlete confident in what their body's able to do, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Like you don't that is the biggest stimulus. That is the biggest thing KPI that you can give an athlete is the ability for them to know their body is capable, and if it gets hurt, that it can heal, and that it can perform what it needs to perform. And once you get an athlete there, then they are addicted to moving their bodies. They're addicted to performing. They're addicted to learning. They're addicted to trying new things. But we are so many of the things that we sell, so many of the things that we preach are just sold in this like poison like way of you're creating a weaker athlete, you're creating an athlete that believes in themselves less, you're creating a less capable athlete. And it's scary to see where it goes because again, if that thought process stems or starts at 30 or 40, okay, like then for the next 30, it's still not going to be pretty for the next 30 to 40 years. I'm not saying that's okay, but okay, like you've lived your athletic career. But I'm serious. That thought process is starting with some of these kids where they are questioning these things when they're 13 to 14 years old, which means by the time they're 20, they're going to be living like a 40-year-old. And that is just not good for our society. And we talk about the obesity pandemic that we have, and we talk about so many things that are wrong with the movement culture in America. And it's like that's on us. That's on us in the way that we treat it. And we make training boring, we make training scary, we make them feel like they're not enough, and then we wonder why they don't train. We wonder why they don't like it. It's like, man, it's not society. I mean, there is societal like aspects, but you can't just throw it all on society and it's like, man, the kids today. It's like, no, the coaches today, man. The coaches today are the problem, and we can fix that and we can change that. And I've seen it change. That's the thing. Like I know it's doable because I have seen it changed in my place. I've seen what happens when you surround an athlete with a bunch of other athletes that have been, I call it red pilled, that have that belief in themselves, and how quickly they change and adopt to their surroundings and the culture around them. And they always come to you and they're like, man, I never thought that was possible. Or my favorite one is, man, your training is magic. Like I never thought. It's like nothing about this is magic. Not a single thing. Nothing, and that's the thing. You just got confidence in yourself, and now you are not inhibiting yourself on everything that you do because you're not scared anymore. That has nothing to do with the sets and reps, it has nothing to do with the stimulus. Nothing we do is that different other than the fact that we gave you belief back in your body, and once you have belief in your body, I truly, truly believe you're way more capable than even you believe.
That's so true, and it's like the onus does fall on adults, and I hate that whole argument, "Well, like, kids nowadays are just lazy and weak," and it's like, well, who ingrained that in them? And you said it could be doctors even as well who are like, "Well, you just have a knee problem, you just have bad knees," and it's like, imagine as a 12-year-old girl, like, hearing that, you're like, "Shoot, like, something's seriously wrong with me," instead of learning how to be empowered and to train around the injury or to get a little bit uncomfortable of a stimulus. I think it's so important for adults to use words carefully. And I think it's so funny that you said that when your kids were tumbling on the mats, they asked if they were going to get hurt. And man, I thought I've seen it all, Austin, with kids being afraid of like certain games and drills. But you'll find it funny that this summer I had a group of 10-year-old girls do wheelbarrow races. And it was like on the dirty grass, and the grass was kind of like sharp because in Florida it's like not that comfortable. And they were all complaining, their hands were hurting. The parents were watching, and the parents were really mad. We were doing wheelbarrow races because some girls were like dragging each other on the ground and they were so scared they were going to get hurt. And I was like, this is the problem. We are training athletes to be scared of uncertainty and getting in uncomfortable positions, getting dirty even. Like it's just so bizarre, and like you said, it goes much deeper than sports. It goes into their relationships or their own health and well-being, and being scared of like sickness and disease and like bubble wrapping their lives. I mean, we saw it all during COVID, but it goes so deep. I don't know if you've read the book The Coddling of the American Mind, but
Oh,
it
it's a
kind of just
banger.
reminds me of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that book, and again, I've seen the real life example too of I had a grandma and a grandpa, and my grandpa is the type to think like he is like to a fault thinks he's invincible. Like he's the dude that cut open his he's like 72 and he was climbing trees because he's bored, and he's climbing trees and he's cutting off branches, and he cut himself with a chainsaw. Didn't tell anybody. Came in for lunch because we forced him to come in for lunch because he was just going to keep working all day. Uh, and My mom saw that he had like long johns or like the leather. I'm blanking on the name, but leather overalls on basically. And she saw a cut through one of the overalls, and she's like, "What'd you do there?" She's like, he's like, "Oh, I just nicked myself with the chainsaw. It's okay." She's like, "What do you mean you just nicked yourself?" And he needed 20 stitches, and like he didn't think anything of it, thought nothing, and got it. Okay, so you have that dude that has been ingrained that he's invincible, probably to a fault for sure, but like that's his mentality. Invincible, keeps going, 72 climbing trees. And my grandma on the other side was told she was sick when she was young, told she's from a sick family, told she's always going to be sick, told she's going to die young. She stopped moving, she stopped trying, she stopped believing in her body and her ability to heal. And she slowly degenerated into a point where she was taking 40 pills a day. Like they're married. These two are married. So it's like you couldn't get any more like close to each other of what story this person was told and what story this person was told, and how quickly they just completely spread out into two different pathways. And again, that started happening to her when she was 50 or 60. Okay, we are doing the same thing to kids when they're 13 years old. I mean, even to the point of like pills, like, man, like the amount of medications they're just giving kids. And I'm not a doctor, but man, it's like, oh, it is scary to see where it goes and what happens from it. And we're doing it because we're too busy or we're not paying attention to the words that we are saying to these kids. And we're not paying attention to the long term effects because we're always two steps removed. The doctor, the coach, whoever it is, anybody but basically the parent. And sometimes the parents, or they say something and they don't spend enough time around the kid to not be two steps removed from it. So doctor will say something, doctor will hand the kid something, coach will say something, coach will give a knee brace to a kid, whatever it is, and then they send that kid off and they never see that kid again or whatever it is. But that kid lives with that thought process for the rest of their life. Oh, I can't pay attention. Oh, something's wrong with my knee. Oh, I need this. Oh, I need that. And then you have the rest of their lives in that. And I know it works that way because I'm a very stubborn person and I'm a person that does not like authority and I do not like being told what to do. And when I was 16, I was told that I will never deadlift again. I will never squat again because of my back. I herniated a disc in my back, and that's the first thing a doctor told me. I met this doctor one time for 10 minutes, and he's like, "You herniated your disc. You'll never squat again, never deadlift again. Just go home. Just it'll get better in like 6-ish months, but never do those things again, and you'll be just fine." And your backspace. And so, like a person that is very stubborn, doesn't like authority, I believed that for the longest time. And now you have somebody that doesn't have the predisposition to basically be an asshole, to be stubborn, to not like I am getting sucked into this indoctrination as a 16-year-old because I should be able to trust authorities. I should be able to believe what they say. And it took me 6 to 7 years to get out of that thought process and to fully believe that my body's capable and function the way that I want to do and I can deadlift and I can squat. And that was from a 10-minute conversation, and I'm a stubborn person. So you have somebody that is a little bit more, they were born just a little bit more compassionate. They were born just a little bit more influenceable. They weren't born in a stubborn family like my family. They respect authority a little bit more. They're just born in that type of family and they have that 10-minute authority. How long does that take that person to get out of those thought processes? So I've seen it, I've lived it, and I know it's very real. And I've seen the back end of getting an athlete out of those thought processes and just how much power and empowerment that gives that athlete. And I've seen it change lives. And I think we're changing lives for the worse right now, which is not a good thing.
Thanks for telling that story. I think it's so fascinating when you hear people who eventually trusted in their body's ability to heal and didn't fixate so much on how much pain they were in or how injured they were, and they kind of took their healing into their own hands. And I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Sarno's work. His book, it's called Healing Back Pain, and his principles apply to people with like chronic illness like Lyme disease and like autoimmune disorders. But he basically talks about, look, like if you have painful symptoms of anything, don't get so angry about it, but become indifferent to that pain and just kind of get on with life as if you're already healed. And it's just super fascinating research. And Dr. Ellen Langer also talks about this as well. But just like the way you talk to yourself and your body and your brain really changes your ability to heal and to feel better. And it's amazing. And I'm personally using it for my own health, and no nutrition protocol did anything for me. But as soon as I started to change my brain, instantly better. And it's wild. And you hear these stories all the time. So I'm sure you'll enjoy his book, Dr. Sarno, if you've had back pain in the past.
Yeah, I'll for sure check that out because I was handed McGill's book. And
Yeah. Yeah.
in McGill's book, it's like this is the insanity of that book. And like he talks about how you need to have sex with a neutral spine. Like that is how deep into it he goes. Like to the point where he has, I'm not shitting you. If you guys have read Back Mechanic, there are diagrams and pictures of a neutral spine. Like it's like, oh
Wait,
my
I
God.
totally missed that part.
Yeah, yeah, neutral, like pictures of it. And like I got to that. And that honestly, I was reading McGill for the longest time, and that was the thing that broke me. I'm like, this is actually like you're trolling right now. This is a joke. Like this is not how you can live your life for the future of like healing yourself and becoming. And
Well,
that's
it's like
I
who's to say what perfect posture is?
yeah.
Like
There's no
what
that's
does
the
that
frustrating thing.
mean?
There's no
Like
science there either. I have so many guys like oh, I'm blanking on his last name. Why am I blanking on his last name? Aaron. Oh my goodness, he's gonna kill me. My buddy Aaron, he's really big on TikTok and Instagram, but his whole thing is calling out chiropractors and the lack of science that is there. And is blown up from it, but every study that he shows is like, you get this is bullshit. Like, and that's why it's frustrating because then you have people that are like, well, you and me, we're just talking about woo woo stuff. We're talking about the brain. We're talking about belief. It's like you got to follow the science. Like, go look at the science. The science does not say perfect posture. It does not say neutral spine. It doesn't say any of that. It doesn't say cracky backy. It doesn't say you can't move your spine. Like, that is not what the science is saying either. And the science of pain is much more in the light of what we are talking about anyway. So that's the frustrating thing is it's kind of backed up by actual pseudoscience, and then we are called the pseudoscientists. Like, people are called the pseudoscientists that are actually looking at the data, actually looking at some of these studies, and actually seeing it in front of them, living, breathing of athletes that are getting better through these methods. And that I think that's one of the frustrating pieces there. It's just there's not a lot of actual true education on these things. It's like this fake virtue signaled education to say because it's easier to say the follow the McGill Big Three than looking at the actual complexity that goes into back pain or goes into whatever it is in the health field. And that's a frustrating piece for me is I don't think we're actually looking at some of these things. And as soon as it sounds woo woo as soon as you are saying it, then it can't be science, they say. But it's like, man, that's a frustrating piece because you guys aren't actually looking at the data there.
So funny what you say about chiropractors because it's like, what is like a good spine? What is good posture? And it's like, are we actually preparing people for life? Because if you're in the woods being chased by a bear, you're not going to be like, oh my gosh, like, what did my chiropractor tell me? No, you're going to freaking run and like give your all to get away. So I just find it so fascinating. Like, just there's too many specialists out there, too many gurus just saying, you have a problem and I'm the one to fix it.
Yeah, cracking magic hands. And I mean, that's one of the craziest things in Cairo school is a whole semester of their school is based off how to build a business around reoccurring clients. Do you know how you get reoccurring clients? Yeah, they have to be hurt. And Nietzsche, I just read this in like one of Nietzsche's biggest arguments on religion. And I don't believe it in religion, but his whole thing with his like he was anti-Christian because his whole thing was the church needs sick people to heal. Like that was his whole argument in that art. But what I took that as, I'm like, oh my god, this is just our health field. Like the health field needs sick people to heal. So like even if we're not sick, you and I, we're not sick. The athlete, the 13-year-old athlete, like they're not sick, they're not hurt. But if they're not hurt, they don't need you. And so like that is one of the craziest things. Like that is taught to these Cairo students. You need reoccurring clients. This is how you build that out. And even if they're not sick, you need to find a way for them to be sick. We need to find a way for them to be hurt. And that is as much on us strength coaches as well. Like we need to preach that like you are hurt or you're going to get hurt, like that fear based training because otherwise you don't need me. And I just think that's such a poor way to market yourself and such a poor way to approach client acquisition. Like, I don't want any of my athletes to need me ever. I want them to want to come and want to be a part of what we have. And magically, once you approach it that way, you still get clients and they are reoccurring way more often than when you approach it in a way of like they need you. And yeah, it's just such a gross way to approach it. It's like, I need to make money, so you need to be sick. It's like, oh, you're literally ruining that person's life for a dollar bill, for a piece of paper. Not good.
I think it's really great of you that you're equipping the athletes with what they need to kind of do their own program one day. And that's what it should be with strength coaches listening or even team coaches. You should educate your athletes so much and just really make sure that they can go out into the world and do a lot of these things. And I think that can be the most rewarding part of strength and conditioning when they graduate and get to that point and they no longer need to rely on you. And I see a lot of that with like strength coaches. They just want to scare athletes. Well, you need me for like injury prevention or you need me to do your progressive overload. It's like, well, for how long? Like you should be able to teach them for a period of time and then they get on with life.
Yeah, and that's again, like, I have so many athletes that we've worked with for 6+ years now that could run my sessions in a blink of an eye, and they could go run their own sessions at a different gym, and whenever they're traveling, it's what they do. Like, they could do that in a blink of an eye, and it's like a you gotta get rid of that fear base that you're gonna lose them, because as soon as you, like, just let them go, like, they stay around not because they need you, it's because they just wanna hang out with the community that you've built, and you can focus on big things like that community that you built, and again, it has nothing to do with your X's and O's. That's not why they're there in the first place, you know? So stop selling them on that BS. Stop telling them it. Like almost every single one of my athletes could go take my program and go run it by themselves at the gym. Like they could go do that. They know how to do it. They've been a part of the program for a long enough time. When they travel or when they're not with us, it's exactly what they do. They don't need me for a second. They just want to be a part of the community. And I think that's something that's also not talked about is like just community and spaces to believe in something. And I think that is something that we should sell much more than that X's and O's and the like gatekeeping side of the information. It's like all of my athletes could do exactly what I'm doing right now. They all have the abilities. When I'm gone from the gym or if I'm sick, I have 3 athletes that could I have had run my sessions for me for them. They know how to do all of it. Like and you still don't lose them. And honestly, you lose them way less because now they're just there by their own will. You're not trying to force them in there. You're not running them based off fear. And that's when it gets really, really fun because then you're focusing on things that matter, which is how can we make this community better? Can we focus on things like belief in the athlete's self? How can we bring new people into our community and still keep our core values that we have right now and hopefully better their lives? Well, they better our lives because they brought in their new individual thought processes and personality.
I do want everyone to follow up with you as we wrap this up. So, where can everyone find you?
Just Austin Yoakum everywhere.
Great. I'll be sure to include that in the caption below so everyone can check out your work. This has been amazing. I'm sure we could have talked for a few more hours. So maybe we'll have Austin back on the show to dive into more deep topics. But again, Austin, thank you so much. And I will see everyone on the next episode.